What if I told you the CIA has been helping Ukraine target Russian oil? There is a dirty secret about modern warfare that rarely makes it into the press briefings. You don't win wars by blowing things up. You win wars by breaking systems. Now, that distinction matters because over the past year, Ukraine stopped treating Russia's oil infrastructure like a fireworks show and started treating it like an engineering problem. Hey friends, Wes here, and according to multiple reports from the Tldr, that shift happened with quiet help from the CIA, the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency.
No time for questions, just action. In or out.
Okay, well then I'm out.
We have information that the CIA, working alongside the U.S. military, helped Ukraine shift from nice explosions for social media strikes to a more disciplined campaign against Russian oil refineries. What's more, the CIA provided targeting data to hit the refinery at a specific bottleneck component described by the Telegraph as a coupler device, identified by a CIA expert as the sort of part that keeps a plant down for weeks, if not months. This isn't really help from the CIA in the Hollywood sense. There's no joystick, there's no guy whispering "now" into an earpiece. The help came in identifying what part actually matters in the refinery. Now, coupler device sounds vague. It sounds almost silly, but it is neither, because if you understand how refineries work, that one word tells you almost everything about the strategy. So let's start with what changed. Early in the war, Ukrainian long-range strikes against energy targets looked like what you would expect from a country learning under fire. Fuel depots burned, storage tanks went up. These were dramatic visuals, but the Russians were able to make fast repairs. Those strikes had value, but they were blunt. Then something shifted. Ukrainian drones began targeting specific refinery units, not just buildings, but processes. Not just oil, but the choke points inside the machinery that turns crude into usable fuel. That kind of targeting does not come from vibes. It comes from understanding which component keeps the whole system alive. This is where the CIA enters the picture and works together with Ukraine's own excellent intelligence services. The New York Times reported that the CIA pushed hard to maintain intelligence cooperation even during the political turbulence in Washington. You know, when Trump shut down intelligence sharing in March of 2025. Not because Ukraine needed help flying drones, but because U.S. intelligence had something uniquely valuable to offer: systems knowledge. Intelligence agencies, the size of the CIA, are very good at one thing most militaries struggle with: understanding how industrial systems fail under pressure. They track supply chains, they track maintenance cycles, they track what parts are hard to replace, and which ones are sitting in a warehouse somewhere. In this case, that analysis pointed to something deceptively simple: a coupling. A refinery is a living machine that runs on pressure, heat, hydrogen, catalysts, and rotating equipment that has zero patience for improvisation. You can fix an oil tank with steel and time. You cannot fix a key rotating train or precision coupling with vibes and patriotic speeches. Also, refineries are layered. A crude distillation unit separates crude into fractions. Downstream units like hydrocrackers and fluid catalytic cracking units take those fractions and turn them into gasoline, diesel, or jet fuel. Oh, and feedstock for petrochemicals. When one major unit goes down, the whole factory can be forced into a partial operation or a complete shutdown. That is why refinery outages, even localized ones, can bite harder than you would expect. Now, Reuters has reported that Ukrainian strikes have at times taken significant portions of Russia's refining capacity completely offline, especially when combined with planned maintenance. Reuters also notes that sanctions and replacement part constraints complicate Russia's repairs and sourcing. That is the CIA's strategic logic in a nutshell. Refineries are where Russia's bloodstream gets processed into usable fuel. You hit the right refinery nodes, and you're not just burning a building, you are reducing sortie rates, trucking, rail, throughput, and military logistics resilience. So what is this so-called coupler device, and why would it matter? Well, coupler device is not a standard public name for one single refinery widget. It sounds more like a journalist's simplified label for a class of components. But the most likely candidate, based on how refineries actually fail, is a coupling in a rotating equipment train. Think of the big machines that keep refineries alive: compressors, pumps, blowers, and turbines. They run at high speed under heavy load, and they are intolerant of misalignment. A coupling is what connects a driver, like a motor or a turbine, to the driven equipment, like the compressor, the pump, or the blower. In large industrial applications, couplings can be custom engineered for torque, for vibration, for thermal expansion, and specific alignment tolerances. If you lose a coupling in critical service, you don't just swap it. You often need a full outage, alignment checks, balancing, inspections, and sometimes replacement of adjacent equipment, because failures are rarely polite. And even when you have the part, installing it can be a precise job. You need the correct coupling model, the rating, the metallurgy, and the geometry. You need specialized machining and balancing. You need laser alignment, vibration analysis, and a controlled recommissioning. You need the unit down, depressurized, purged, and safe for maintenance crews. Whew. All that for one coupling. When you don't have that part, you are dead in the water. Large couplings are not mass consumer items. You can't go to Temu and get a large coupler for an oil refinery. Or maybe you can. Temu has almost everything. Okay, large couplings are not mass consumer items, right? They can be specialized, they can be custom, and they can be slow to manufacture. When you read the industry material on geared couplings and industrial couplings, these commonly emphasize high torque applications and specialized manufacturing. And the documents discussing lead times for these types of components underline why spares planning matters in heavy industry. Now you add in the Russia factor. Russia is not cut off from the world, but sanctions and export controls have complicated access to certain industrial components. Reuters explicitly notes replacement parts have become harder to obtain, forcing substitution and workarounds. So when you hear that Ukrainian strikes targeted a coupler device, you're not hearing about a random widget. You're hearing about a strategy designed by Ukraine and the CIA, designed to turn a drone strike into weeks or months of downtime. That is not destruction, that is denial. And this is exactly the kind of targeting logic intelligence agencies excel at. Now, this is where it is important to be clear about what the CIA likely did or did not do. They did not tell Ukraine how to fly drones. They did not choose targets in real time. They did not pull the trigger. What they likely provided was analysis that answered questions like, which units inside a refinery are truly critical path right now? Which train is running? Which train is in maintenance? And which one is already limping? Which spare parts are on site and which are not? Which facility has the most painful constraints under sanctions? Where are the high-value choke points that could cause a cascading downtime effect? That information can be derived without setting foot inside Russia. Industrial logistics leaves signatures. Maintenance rhythms leave patterns. Procurement bottlenecks show up in data. Ukraine brings proximity and battlefield learning. The US CIA brings global visibility and analytical depth. And together, that creates pressure Moscow cannot easily counter. Now, let's address the question everyone always jumps to: escalation. There is always a chorus warning that helping Ukraine strike inside Russia risks escalation. We heard it with HIMARS, we heard it with ATACMS, we heard it with F-16s. The reality is that Russia does not escalate based on legal arguments or press releases. It escalates based on perception and internal narrative. If the Kremlin wants to believe the CIA is crippling its energy sector, it doesn't need proof. It needs a story that feels plausible and politically useful back in Moscow. That risk exists whether the CIA helps or not. The more important question is whether the pressure works. And here's the uncomfortable truth for Moscow. Refinery outages do not just hurt exports. They affect sortie rates, they affect logistics, they affect rail and trucking capacity. They stress domestic fuel supply. This is pressure applied not at the point of impact, but at the foundation. Precision of this kind can feel destabilizing when like escalation because it looks coordinated, patient, and systemic. Personally, I am done pretending that effectiveness is the same thing as recklessness. Ukraine is not escalating the war by breaking the machinery that fuels missile strike on its cities. It is shortening the war by making aggression unsustainable. Wars do not end because aggressors are reassured. They end when the cost curve bends the wrong way. By identifying the part Russia cannot easily replace, the CIA, with Ukraine's help, has done something far more dangerous than blowing up a tank. It has made time the enemy, and that, more than any single strike, is why this campaign matters. That's it for today, my friends. Subscribing is the best free way to support these videos, and prevents me from selling my services as a male stripper for bachelorette parties.
Hey!
What? I'm joking. They know I'm joking. As always, glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. Crimea is Ukraine.